Welcome back to Blatantly Honest with Makaila Nichols. On today's episode, I sat down with Heather Drevna, the Vice President of Communications at RAINN, which is the nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization. Heather leads a team of communication professionals in promoting RAINN's mission and resources, educating the public, and working with media partners to raise the visibility of sexual violence. You may know RAINN is a national sexual assault hotline, which is 1-800-656 4673. But today, get to know the team behind RAINN and their powerful mission. Welcome, Heather. Growing up, did you or someone you know ever experience sexual violence?
Unfortunately, I think it's the reality that it's hard not to know someone who's experienced this issue in some way, whether it's yourself, a friend, or a family member. It's something that really touches us all. I mean, the statistics are that every 73 seconds, someone in this country is experiencing some form of sexual violence. So it's a personal issue to almost every family in America.
Yeah, I know it's awful. And especially right now during all this pandemic, I mean, the numbers continue to rise. And it seems like people feel like they can't get help. And that's not the case. So why do you think it is that all these numbers are going up?
I think when we look at this period of time, we will probably see from the data that some types of sexual violence have declined just because of the lockdowns and the restrictions.
Mhm.
So, for instance, incidents that stem from social settings like bars or parties on college campuses, especially because everything was virtual for the spring. But unfortunately, as we've been seeing both anecdotally and by the numbers, other types of violence are increasing, especially domestic violence and child sexual abuse. And I think that's a direct result of the pandemic and folks being in close quarters as part of, unfortunately, the stay-at-home restrictions. It was just one of the side effects of that.
I know it's devastating, especially for the kids. I know I was reading an article and the people that are calling RAINN can range in age. How's the youngest member that's called for help?
We don't keep any personal identifying information. So we don't collect demographic information on our calls. We do make notations if, for instance, a caller indicates that they are a minor, just for our own data collection purposes. However, we don't have firm data samples of knowing exactly what age many of the callers are. What we do know is that from those anecdotal data collections, for the first time we saw in March, and has continued every month since then, that more than half of visitors to the online hotline who indicated their age in some way, shape, or form were under the age of 18.
What does that say to you guys?
I think, again, one of the really horrible side effects of this pandemic is that kids lost access to the safe spaces and safe individuals who would be the first people to spot abuse and would be the ones who are most likely to report it. So people like teachers, coaches, school counselors, the parents of their close friends. When folks were forced to quarantine, all of that access went away, and many schools no longer had a way for there weren't ways necessarily for kids to know how to speak up and say, hey, I need help with online learning platforms. So as we go back into many restrictions in the fall, and as many colleges and high schools and younger schools are all going back online for the fall semester, we've been working to try and encourage states to create those kinds of mechanisms in their online platforms, make sure teachers know to be on the lookout for this and can encourage kids to reach out to them as a safe person to report to.
Who would have thought that schools are turning to online? And again, you brought up the whole point of teachers can't necessarily, look at a kid and see if they have either bruises or something, or they're retreating within themselves. What do you suggest for the kids who might be at home and maybe they're going through something and maybe they're nervous to reach out online? What advice do you have for those kids?
Well, again, I want to emphasize the National Sexual Assault Hotline is available 24/7. We are available 365 days a year. As I mentioned, it's completely anonymous. We don't track or keep any sort of personally identifying information. That's available at 800-656 HOPE, which is 4673, or you can chat online at online.rainn with two N's.org. We find that many people, especially younger people, prefer the chat because of the anonymity of it, because they don't have to verbalize what is happening. They can chat it out, have that conversation. It seems a little less personal for some people. So that's a great option if you don't feel like you can talk about it, or if you don't have the freedom to talk about it because you're at home and don't have the privacy that you would want to talk about it. But I would just want kids to know that the hotline is here. We can help. We can talk you through your options. We can talk you through safety planning. We can connect you to help and resources, but also to know that there are adults in your life that care about you. And please reach out to those folks if you feel that you can't reach out in your normal ways.
Kids that are going online, and how do you find that when they're searching for help resources, whether it's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline or RAINN's hotline, how do you find that people are learning about RAINN the most?
Google would be the best answer, I think.
Yeah.
This generation, all of the younger generations are much more online savvy. I think a lot of folks my age learned about RAINN because of some of the connections that we had very early on with celebrity spokespeople like Tori Amos. And I think I first learned about RAINN back when it was founded through zines like Sassy and other publications that were kind of feminist, aimed at the teenage demographic. But now, thanks to search engines and thanks to Google, who has been a partner with us in making sure that the information is out there, if you are searching on anything related to any sort of topic of sexual violence, you're going to find us pretty quickly.
That's incredible. Google has a great way of reaching out and helping, and so what an awesome partner to have.
Yep, they've been wonderful in making sure that that information gets into people's hands.
Great, as it should. What made you want to join RAINN?
As I mentioned, I found out about RAINN way back toward the very beginning of the organization, and I unfortunately had cause to use RAINN services as a college student. I was a resident advisor, and I was at a Catholic school that really didn't do much on sexual assault prevention. We were kind of left to learn about ways to help students on our own. And so I found RAINN to be a really valuable resource at that time and had continued to follow the organization. I actually recently just joined RAINN. I've spent most of my career in healthcare communications. So when the opportunity came to be part of the public affairs team at RAINN, I jumped at it because I feel really passionately about the subject and the opportunity to use the communication skills that I've developed over the course of my career to help reach more people.
Wow, that's incredible. So how long have you been at RAINN now?
Just about 7 months.
7 months? Wow, that's exciting. Almost a full year.
It feels like a full year after
I'm sure.
after the
Yeah.
year we've had.
Oh my God. Yeah. No one knows what day it is, what month it is. So I don't blame you. During this pandemic, I assume a lot of yourself and other people are working from home. How was that?
It's been incredibly smooth. We have an amazing technology team. Most of our technology is developed in-house and is proprietary, and we were able to take all of our operations, including the hotlines, remote incredibly quickly when the pandemic first started to gain steam in March. So we have not missed a beat. In fact, we've been serving more visitors per month in the last 3 months than we have ever in the organization's history. Back in May, right as we predicted with the stay-at-home orders lifting, we saw a surge in visitors to both the hotline and the online hotline. For the first time that month, we crossed 30,000 visitors in a month. Typically, we average about 25,000 visitors. So that was about an 18 to 20% increase. And that's been sustained over the last couple of months. So we're seeing a strong need out there, but we've also been able to ramp up by hiring new staff and training new volunteers to make sure that we've been able to meet that demand.
Wow. That's awful that, you have to bring on more staff, but good that there's help and resources available. What does it look like for someone who may work at RAINN or they're volunteering?
Well, we couldn't do this without the volunteers. First of all, they commit to a very lengthy training process. They also commit to a long time horizon for volunteering because of that lengthy training process and the investment that both they help to supplement our full-time staff on the hotline. We also partner with about 1,100 local sexual assault service providers across the country. So if you're coming in on the phone line, you typically will be routed based on your area code to a SASP in the area where you are so that they can help connect you to local resources. But they are part of our network, and so you'll be met with the same empathy and support no matter who's answering your call.
How many volunteers do you guys have on average?
We have several hundred. I'm not sure exactly what the number is right now, but it's absolutely been amazing to me because many of our volunteers have been with us for many years. They're an incredibly dedicated group, and they're just fantastic.
Yeah. Good people, good people. So take us through a typical workday for you.
Oh gosh, I wish there was a typical day.
Not a thing.
But there's not quite a typical day. It might be easier to think of sort of the types of things I guess I addressed
There you
earlier.
go.
The communications team is responsible for our media. So I will typically end up talking to a couple of reporters in a day. That could also be talking with someone who's doing a podcast or a video blog like you to make sure that we're getting the message about RAINN out. We also are incredibly active on social media. You can connect with us at RAINN on Twitter and Instagram, and at RAINN1 on Facebook. So we might be doing planning and starting different campaigns based on the month, what our topics and themes are. Typically spend some time each day working with our development team on our fundraising efforts as well. We are not, the hotline is created and operated by RAINN, so it is not a government funded hotline. We do fundraising to support our hotline operations, and that's a big part of what my team assists with as well. We also spend a lot of time working with creatives and content producers, whether those are TV or film writers or directors or producers. We work with playwrights, we work with podcast producers, anyone who is doing anything in storytelling that relates to sexual violence, we are happy to connect with and to help provide more victim-centered, trauma-informed resources to folks, especially as they're drafting content. We do a lot of review of content and making suggestions as well on how to make sure that things are more supportive of victims, how to make sure that entertainment isn't potentially re-traumatizing for viewers who may be watching and have had an experience with sexual violence. So sometimes that includes content warnings for programs, includes our end card or PSAs. For instance, Lifetime just aired Surviving Jeffrey Epstein, a two-part docuseries. They've been a wonderful partner to us and aired a PSA for us, I believe, every hour of that series. They've done that before during their Surviving R. Kelly series, and we saw a 40% increase in volume to the hotlines. Entertainment has a huge power in getting the word out and raising awareness. We worked with the producers of Grey's Anatomy over a year ago on an episode called Silent All These Years, and a professor of media studies actually did a study in JAMA afterward and found that awareness of sexual violence had increased dramatically thanks to that episode. So it's one of the big focuses we have in making sure, one, that storytelling is accurate, that it's not playing into tropes, especially, and that it's survivor focused and trauma informed, but also making sure that we can use entertainment as a way to get messages out and information out and resources into people's hands.
Speaking of that, I saw that you guys just came out with a new PSA, mainly about people being at home. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of the things we wanted to make sure when the pandemic started, we anticipated what I explained earlier, the fact that people were in close quarters. We thought we might see domestic violence and child sexual abuse increasing. Typically at times of the year when people are in close quarters, so things like the holidays, we know that we see a flatlining in volume as people are together and don't have as much privacy for help. And then afterwards, we see a spike. So that's what we had anticipated with the stay-at-home restrictions, and that's exactly what we saw. But we wanted to make sure that we were getting information in folks' hands. So we took some of the PSAs that we had done. We worked with a partner to get those into the hands of every radio and TV station across the country. Those have been airing very consistently, especially on talk radio, which has been fantastic to see. Again, helping to make sure that the information is getting out there as widely as possible and into people's hands. We've also done a lot of radio interviews across the country, again, explaining what we were seeing on the hotline, how the COVID situation was contributing to that, and making sure people knew that the hotline was available for support.
So, what about this? As a victim of sexual assault myself, I found that, just from speaking with different survivors and victims, a lot of them are too scared to come forward. How do you kind of, if someone reaches out to you guys and they're like, oh, I feel like people aren't going to believe me, or I feel like I'm too scared, what do you have to say to those kind of people?
Disclosure is a really personal process for everyone. We would never encourage someone to come forward if they weren't comfortable with it. They need to be the one to make that decision for them. As you know, survivors of sexual violence have already had agency taken away from them in one way, and so we wouldn't want to take their agency away in any other way. The hotline is completely survivor-led, so we talk to the survivor about whatever they want to talk about. That can look very different for many people. About a good portion of our calls are someone who is in immediate crisis. There's someone who something has just happened in the last 24 to 48 hours. They're looking for help. They're looking for practical resources. They want to know more about medical attention. Maybe they're thinking of having a safe exam, a sexual assault forensic exam, commonly known as a rape kit done. They want to learn more about that process. They want to understand their options for reporting to police. The vast majority of our callers, though, are anywhere along their healing journey. It could be 2, 5, 10, 40 years for them. And frequently we hear we're the first people that they've told. There's just such a weight of shame with this issue that people carry with them. And that's one of the reasons we're trying to talk about it more publicly so that people can feel that weight lifted. One of the things we've really focused on this year, starting with Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month in April, is the role that family and friends and loved ones can play in supporting survivors. We know from talking to a survivor that that first disclosure experience really impacts their healing journey. If it goes positively, they are much more likely to start their healing journey and to continue to disclose to other people and to really begin opening up and healing. If that goes negatively, if they're met with disbelief or they're met with blame from others, they can shut down and not bring it up again for years. So one of the things that we've been pushing in our public education this year is we created an acronym that we call TALK, and that's aimed at family and friends. It's a quick way to remember if someone discloses it to you, how to approach that conversation. The first first letter is T. We recommend that stands for thank them for telling you. So it's important to take a moment to acknowledge just how incredibly difficult it can be to tell someone about any type of trauma, especially this type of trauma. And so showing your appreciation for the trust that they're showing in you at the beginning of the conversation can help to make them feel more comfortable. A stands for ask how you can help. We know many people's first instinct might be to try and rush in and give their loved one advice on what to do next. You should report to police, you should do this, you should do that. But it's important to let the survivor make their own choices about what to do next. You don't have to have all the answers. You just need to be there to listen and let them know that you're there for them in any way that they need. The L, and I think this is the really key one, stands for listen without judgment. It's normal to have reactions like anger or shock when someone you care about shares an experience of sexual violence. We hate to think about the people we love being harmed in any way. But sometimes those reactions can make a survivor feel like they're responsible for your feelings. And that can discourage them from feeling that they can open up further to you or to others because they don't want to carry that burden. The K stands for keep supporting. We know that healing takes time, and it's crucial that survivors have ongoing support throughout the healing process. That's unique for every person. It looks different for every person, and it can take years. I think one of the most important things about this is just keep including that person in your life. They might want to talk about it, and that sometimes they might not want to talk about it, but they just want to continue to be treated normally and included in the types of things that you would do with them before. So continuing to do those things together is a really important piece. The National Sexual Assault Hotline, again, it's at 800-656-HOPE or online.rainn.org, is also there for friends and family. We're happy to talk through these types of strategies for folks if someone you love has been affected or someone has just disclosed to you and you're not sure what to do next.
So, with people that are young and that are considered minors, what is the best age, do you think, in your opinion, not necessarily Rain's opinion, but to start having these conversations about sexual violence and sex in general? Because I feel like a lot of kids don't really know where that line is because they've never been exposed.
I think it's important to start with consent, and to start talking about consent in non-sexual ways from a very early age, letting kids know that they are in charge of their bodies and they're in charge of who touches their bodies, who has the right to hug them or kiss them or touch them. You see this even, I'm a parent myself now, and you see this even in preschoolers. You have to have that conversation about maybe your friend doesn't want to be hugged, and starting often and early to have those kinds of conversations about respecting other people's boundaries is really important. If we don't have those conversations early, I think we have a much higher hurdle when we do start to add the topic of sex onto that conversation.
Definitely. How do you think, as a parent and having a kid, I don't have any kids, so it's a little bit different from me, but how do you think we can prevent sexual violence and sexual assault just every day in our lives, just day to day?
Again, I think it's important to start early with education, with consent, about consent, especially making sure that they understand, um, especially that they understand that they are not responsible or beholden to other people, um, especially if they feel like they are responsible for others' feelings, others' thoughts. They are responsible for themselves, and so making sure that they understand they control who they want to be intimate with. But even if that just means physical touch, again, things like
Mhm.
hugging and kissing, not forcing them to do that with friends or family if they don't want to, and respecting their choices and their boundaries is really important.
I think so too. I think, we live in, especially now with COVID, and it's, social distancing and finding when things are okay and when they're not. So, final takeaway, what do you want people to know about, how can they get involved with RAINN, or what is the best way to join this organization if possible?
Thank you. That's an important question. For folks out there who are watching who might be survivors, or again, loved ones of survivors who want to learn more or learn how to support the survivors in their lives, the National Sexual Assault Hotline is available 24/7, 365 at 800-656-HOPE. That's 4673, or online.rainn with two N's.org. You are not alone. We are here to help. There are thousands of people who also want to help. You don't have to go through this alone. You don't have to bear this burden alone. There is hope and healing out there, and there are people who do want to help.
Fantastic. Heather, you are just absolutely incredible. And I really appreciate all the work you and your team does every day. I know how important it is to be there for survivors just like myself. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Makaila, and for the work that you're doing. We greatly appreciate it. Be bold, be you, and be blatantly honest.